Council to order, please call the roll.
Newman,
Here.
Gimmerdiner,
Here.
Raudenstrau,
Here.
Mylum,
Here.
Cook.
Here. All right, let's go through the agenda. We have a pretty busy evening in front of us, so I'll try to move fast on this. Council on the minutes?
Yes.
Are you good with that? Yeah. Lindsay's legacy, council on this? Sure. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the bills. Question on the bills.
All my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Perfect. Would like it?
I'll take a minute, President.
Mr. Newman? Sorry, so Jim, it's council and then Mr. Newman and then council.
Alrighty, resolution 4.
Standard work days. Council on this?
Sure.
Everybody go with that? Sure. Council on that. Car wash,
I'll take a minute, President.
Mr. Rautenstrau. You can second. All right, block party, Councilwoman Cameron. I'll take it.
Thank you, Dave. Hey, Jenna,
Yes, Mr. Casa?
Madam President, I inadvertently put you on mute as well for the clerk, so for resolution number 7,
Yes, is council.
council. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, and we're an exec, so just come on in.
Okay, for those in the virtual meeting, going to executive, I'm going to be pausing the recording and moving into the waiting room. Madam President, at this time, I've let everyone in from the waiting room on the Zoom call.
And Jim, I understand you have this on your computer? The audit report?
From Deloitte Touche.
Yes. Can you make sure you share your screen? I'm going to have you introduce Matt, Phil. I was going to have you introduce Matt.
Oh, okay. Let's get ready.
Do you have it? Jim, do you have it?
I'm bringing it up right now.
Okay. All right, at this time, I just want to call up our city treasurer to introduce Matt from Drescher and Malecki, who's here to discuss the results from our audit.
I am Wayne Mason, if you will, no, tonight we had our audit performed last March and April, and then we have the baseline results tonight with Matt Montalvo, the partner for Drescher and Malecki, and to explain some of our trend analysis, some of the things we need to work on. And then he's also going to discuss the federal funds and some of the regulations. And then hopefully last but not least, we'll be discussing the fund balance policy that he wants to highlight before he takes his leave. So no further words. Matt.
Thank you. Good to see everybody. I think we did this remotely last week,
Yes.
so it's good to be in front of the group talking in person. So I'll take you through the PowerPoint presentations. I gave everybody handouts. Like Bill mentioned, we'll go through the trends, we'll talk about the results of the audit, and then we'll kind of look at future considerations looking forward. So we'll get right into the presentation. Page 1, the products of our audit. 3 main deliverables that we issue. First, one being the basic financial statements, and that really is the biggest, and most important document that we provide. We also issue 2 letters, one being a management letter with any internal control recommendations or operational recommendations, and then finally an auditor communication letter. We are anticipating that those will be issued in final form before the end of the month. So it will be delivered to this group. But we are in a position where we can report on the results, and we've concluded on our opinion. So that's where I'll lead you into page 2, our required communications. The first being our responsibility is to come in as an independent third party and provide an opinion of the financial statements. So do the records that are provided by management and compiled by management fairly represent or fairly state the city's financial position? So can they be relied upon by not only this group in making budget decisions going forward, can they be relied upon by outside third parties, general counsel and bond agencies, etc. So we do plan on issuing what's referred to as an unmodified opinion on the city's governmental activities and major funds. That's essentially the best you can do from an audit standpoint. We believe that the fund balances, the governmental activities are fairly stated, they can be relied upon. And so it's referred to as unmodified, but essentially a clean opinion of the financial statements. As far as significant items, estimates, policies, no real changes, but there are some pretty substantial long-term liabilities that are projected in the financial statements related to pension and other post-employment benefits. This is consistent across governments throughout New York State and throughout the country. It's required by government accounting standards to project those liabilities. You don't necessarily have to fund those in your current budgets, but you do have to essentially disclose and put that information out there. Then as far as the independence, we're required to be free of conflicts of interest, allows us to be objective in performing the audit and ultimately providing that financial statement. As far as any other matters, we did not have any difficulties in conducting the audit. We received full and open access to the books and records. No significant items or disagreements with management. So we're allowed to perform our audit, review the records, and then ultimately provide that financial statements. Any questions on the required communications before we get into more of the financial trends analysis? Okay. So we'll run through, starting on page 3, we'll run through your major funds. And the first one we look at is the general fund, a 5-year trend of your operations. So essentially your revenues versus your expenditures. And the revenues being represented by the blue line, expenditures the red line. Going backwards a little bit in time, 16, 17, 18. We talked a lot about these over those periods of time where there was a gap between the expenditures and the revenues. And this did have a pretty significant impact on the fund balances over those years. This group did address that. You can see that last year we talked about that trend reversing in 2019. So revenues did exceed expenditures in 2019. We're able to generate some fund balance. And we'll talk a lot about what is the appropriate amount of fund balance to have. Fast forward to 2020, obviously a very unprecedented year from all aspects. No exception on the financial side as well. So the revenues, I think when the pandemic started, a lot of the projections were really bad on revenues. That sales tax, state aid, even sales tax, they were throwing out numbers 20 to 50, almost up to 50% reductions. So as the year went on, those tended to stabilize, and they actually came in better than anticipated and fairly close to what you ended up budgeting for 2020. So just a little bit above that. And then a slight increase from the prior year. On the expenditure side, and this is a trend that we saw really across governments, specifically in Erie County, where the expenditures were reduced almost across the board when you look at all your major expense areas. Those reductions, and then again, the slight uptick in revenues, you were able to realize about a $2.4 million increase in fund balance during 2020. And like I said, that's pretty consistent with a lot of the governments that we've seen this year for 2020, their operations, specifically those in Erie County. They did see an increase in their general fund because of that very reason. Expenses were reduced, and revenues did not come in as poorly as projected. So that $2.4 million, that was an increase to fund balance. On page 4, we show this 5-year trend, and here's presented your fund balances. And where we go with, the reason we showed it as unrestricted, because this is really when you're establishing a fund balance policy, this is what's truly available funds. And all the best practices, whether you're looking at the Office of the State Comptroller or the government finance officers, they kind of look at this unrestricted amount to fund operations. So we put it in those terms. The 5-year trend, you can see you're just over $5.8 million in 2020 in unrestricted fund balance. So that's up from 3.4 in 2019. And then we talked about 16 through 18, we're at more of the levels that was difficult from a cash perspective and an operational perspective. So 2020, that actually in a percentage amount of your budget represents about 23% of your next year's budget. And that's up from about 14% in 2019.
It's up from what percent?
About 14%. So we always look at it as a percentage of your budget. Again, the best practices, they recommend having a minimum of 2 months of your operating expenses, so 16.67% approximately, and they set that as a minimum. So when you're kind of looking at your fund balance policy and what's the appropriate amount, that's kind of a best practice minimum. Certainly, the city of Tonawanda is unique to the city of Tonawanda as far as your operations. But typically that they recommend that cushion because typically the beginning of the year is a difficult cash time because you're waiting for tax revenues to come in. You're waiting for those major revenues to come in the door, but you're still paying the expenses day one. So really, January 1, you really have to have that cushion to have flexibility going forward. So that's the general fund. Just quickly looking at your other major funds, the sewer fund on page 5, pretty stable trend over the last 5 years. And you have seen a positive in 2019 and in 2020. Page 6 shows the fund balances, and you can see those have increased over the last 2 years to right about $945,000 in 2020. When you look at the sewer fund, typically those funds that are tied to more of the infrastructure, generally you want to have a little bit more in fund balance as a percentage of your budget. So that GFOA recommendation doesn't necessarily apply to the sewer fund because you're doing a lot of major capital projects. And down the road, those aren't going to go away. You're always going to have infrastructure. Then finally, I'll just kind of briefly go through the water fund. Pretty stable when you look at it compared to the last 4 or 5 years. And this is where the operations had been turned over to the water authority, and you're paying down on those outstanding debt obligations. So now the debt is eliminated, and there's fairly little activity within the water fund. Going forward, we look at kind of future considerations. The first one we talked about a little bit, the fund balance policy, and really outlining formally what is the appropriate amount of fund balance to have or to maintain. So it's kind of the first piece is identifying, okay, there's best practices out there for what works for the city of Tonawanda. The second piece of a good fund balance policy is identifying what do you do if you go below the appropriate amount, and what do you do if you go above it? So typically you outline, over a period of, you're not going to necessarily be able to improve it within 1 year, but maybe over a 3-year period, you're going to replenish fund balance back to that appropriate level. And you would outline kind of what what those activities would be, reducing expenses, generating revenue, et cetera. And then if you go above those, how are you going to use that fund balances to kind of get back down to the level that you outlined? So these would be kind of more your one-time expenses. Are we going to pay down debt? Are we going to look at capital projects? Those sorts of things. And then the last piece of the fund balance policy would be, how do we set, what is our process for setting money aside? So earmarking funds, whether it's a commitment or an assignment, there's certain restriction levels under a fund balance policy. So it's, what is that process? Who's authorized to set aside funds at those different levels? So that kind of outlines, kind of the best practices around fund balance policies. So we do recommend, and kind of following up on our recommendations in the past, they get that in place going forward for really helping planning considerations and budgeting going forward. The other piece that I know a lot of governments are starting this process with the American Rescue Plan and Fiscal Recovery Fund. So the city of Tonawanda allocation, $1.5 million, that's the total allocation. You get half of that is actually been received, and is essentially at this point, until you identify those eligible areas, is shown as a deferred revenue. So essentially you haven't recognized that revenue yet. And that's based on the guidance of the OSC, is first comes in the door. You don't necessarily, until you've identified what you're going to do with that money, put it as unearned revenue. Because there really is there's a lot of broad latitude, and there's also a lot of restrictions because it is federal funds. So it's always that balance. So from a best practice perspective, we're recommending planning, really understanding the particular projects that you're allowed to embark on, and what are the specific restrictions of those funds. So a couple of the specific restrictions: number one, you can't use it to offset debt service, so you can't directly pay down debt with those funds. You can't make a direct deposit to a pension fund. You can't make a deposit directly into your fund balance either. So you can't take it and say, we're just going to replenish our fund balance. A couple other areas, you can't use it as matching funds for another federal program. That's another one out there. So those are the specific ones outlined within the guidance. But then you're also subject to federal compliance requirements that all federal programs are subject to. So really understanding those, defining the roles. So who's going to be responsible for planning the projects, getting essentially the priority list or wish list together. And then you kind of got to put it through the evaluation criteria. Does it meet the eligibility, and what category? Because there's 4 different categories of spending as well. So what category does it fall under? And then the other piece of the ARP funds is they require you to calculate a revenue loss right off the bat. So essentially, what did the pandemic, how did that impact your revenues? It did have an impact because when you kind of compare your base year, that's 2019, prior to the pandemic, they say you should project where you would have been absent of the pandemic. So there's an inflation rate that's applied, and then it's compared to your actual 2020. And I would imagine that you're going to show a revenue loss based on that. So you do that calculation first, then you identify your eligible areas and go from there. With relation to these funds, with any federal grant program that's not necessarily going to continue forever, the recommendations are always to look at those one-time areas versus kind of plugging a budget hole or using it to fund the budget going forward. We did talk a lot about the general fund, and you are in a stable position. You worked your way back to a stable position. You do have the ability to set those appropriate fund balance levels, and I believe that it is a sustainable budget as it is, and those funds don't necessarily need to help fill any budget gaps.
So even though we showed increased revenue and decreased expenditures, you're gonna project that we're gonna see even more loss of revenue? And
So
is that what the projections are? Or is it a projection on what could have been done?
So it's a federal funding that, under this funding, they want you to calculate what your 2020 revenues essentially would have been if the pandemic didn't happen. And once you do that, that allocation, there's a little more flexibility of what you can use that fund for. That they call it the revenue replacement.
Okay,
So outside of that, you're kind of limited to other areas, water, sewer, broadband infrastructure projects, economic, whether it be businesses or individuals that were negatively impacted, that's a category. Premium pay for essential workers is a category. And then this revenue replacement is actually another category.
You projected we're going to receive 1.5 million from the federal government? Or
We've been
is-
notified.
So it's not 1.62?
No, it's 1.5. That's the last letters. They changed it. It's based on a per diem, per capita amount per person and your thing. So I did the math and it did work out to our census numbers.
Okay,
But it's
Yeah.
1.5 to.
okay,
I did it as an approximate, and it
Okay.
is subject to change.
Right.
As Bill said, that portion of it, because it has to do with state.
Yeah, I do believe I sent the letter about that notified us of our final amount. I said that.
Yeah, you'll definitely want to verify this.
and this fund here, this 1.5 million is not included in
no,
the increase from.
That is not included in the fund
This
balance.
is separate and,
Right now, it's reported as unearned revenue.
Yeah.
So essentially, it has not made its way into the fund balance.
okay, I just wanted to clarify that,
Yep.
that this is not part of
It
the,
is,
okay.
it's kind of future consideration, and it is a forward-looking, for the most part, it's a forward-looking program, where they want you to spend the money on expenditures that were incurred after March 3rd, 2021 is the date that the federal government put out there. So March 3rd, 2021 and going forward. So it's not like, where you look at like a lot of the FEMA programs with COVID costs, you're looking at what do we spend on for PPE equipment. We can get reimbursed for that through FEMA. That's not what this program is.
The revenue we missed out on.
Right. Thank you.
So as far as other recommendations, you're just kind of an update, not a lot of changes from the prior year recommendations. One area that we did recommend in the past was the IT cybersecurity and looking at those, formalizing those policies, a lot of them surrounding cybersecurity. A lot has changed, and you did implement a new system. So a lot of the IT access controls, those types of items did change with the new system. We would like to see a lot of those policies, especially related to cybersecurity, to be formalized. And then with that, the training side of it, because right now, the cybersecurity risks for governments, they're not going down. Every day, there's another one popping up, it seems. So this is an area that is definitely an area of focus that could significantly interrupt your operations if you were subject to another cybersecurity attack. Any other questions, concerns?
I have a question, Matt. Typically in your final statement to the city, you'll identify any deficiencies that we may have outside of the cybersecurity and IT. Are you prepared to highlight any deficiencies that you found?
Like I said, no changes from the prior year. We do have an item in there for the inclusion of certain entities. It's a reporting item, not necessarily related to internal controls. That's always been there. But really, cybersecurity is the one that I wanted to highlight because of the increased emphasis.
Another question? Thanks so much for all you're doing and for coming out tonight.
I appreciate it. So like I said, the final reports will be issued before the end of the month. So that's where we formalize everything, sign off on the final document. Right. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you
evening.
so much. Thank you, Bill. All right, Jason and Mandy. Thanks for coming tonight. So just by way of an explanation, we've invited Jason and Mandy to come talk to us about the Kohler pool and kind of next steps on what we need to do moving forward.
Yeah, so what we did is we contacted North Tonawanda, as you guys are aware, they just kind of went through a very similar situation where they were having problems with their municipal pool, so they had to look and do an overall evaluation, of all the systems associated with that pool, to try to get like a life cycle cost estimate. So they looked at all the components of the pool and would assign a cost to repair or maintain what they have, as well as looking at replacing the pool splash pad. And they actually kind of went a little bit further, I think, than we're interested in going at this point. But basically what they came down with is looking at about $25,000 for that study ran them. So at this point, I think I'd recommend that we budget that for our next year's budget. And at that time, we can look at hiring a consultant and doing the same thing. Basically, what that does, it gives you the information on how to proceed. Because right now, we really don't know, the overall condition of the pool. It's got 5 years left, where it just becomes way too expensive to operate. It's at 10 years. We don't know at this point. I think I've probably talked to most of you, or Mandy has, about the issue that we have right now where we can't hold water. We're dropping about 3 or 4 inches a day, which is obviously abnormal. Once the season is over, I think I'd like to kind of just let that level drop until it stabilizes. If it stabilizes, because let's say it drops down 18 inches, and then instead of it going 3 inches, it's maybe half or whatever normal evaporation change would be. That gives us an idea of where the issue is. Obviously, the worst case scenario is that it just keeps dropping, because if it doesn't stop, you're essentially looking at anything that could be anywhere along the floor of the pool, the drain of the pool, all the underground piping that goes beneath the pool, and on the outside underneath the concrete surrounding it, leading back to the filter room where the chemicals are added and the water's filtered. But I think at least as a starting point to get an idea of what's going on there, it would be a good idea to let that water level drop until it stabilizes and start targeting an area to look at.
Is there any external sign of where the water is pooling, gathering?
No, so we've done some tests, we've tried to do dye tests and things like that, and there's no water pooling like on the outside of the pool, so we set that 4 inches means that we're basically turning over the it's like 220,000 gallons, isn't it? Turning that over this time. So there's no puddling, no by the softball diamond, pull the rates or whatever, and if they try to dye test or whatever, but they don't see anything that we did do on our end that's causing that. And then there's a gap between the gutter line and where the liner comes up, and you can caulk real well, so that gets deteriorated over the years. We fix as much as we could this year. That might be part of the problem. We'll shift things stuff that is, I think it's 65 years old, between 60 and 65 years old. So
Well, right behind you is our city historian. I think. Yeah, I think you're about
I
right.
was 60. Yeah, so I was gonna say, I think last year was supposed to be the 60th anniversary of the SUNY, and it was over before that, so it's right in that, so I mean, it's lived a good life.
Are there any records on normal water loss? Is this, it's obviously abnormal.
This is abnormal, and this is my 19th season, overseeing the pool, and we've kind of always had an issue, but I would say the last probably 6-7 years or whatever, it's stressed more. It's putting an inch every day, and that could be depending on the weather and the amount of swimmers and stuff like that. You're gonna have some kind of loss. This is not because of that loss. This is
We've had a lot of rain too. So.
of what you're gonna see for local pools. So
Jason, do you have a firm that we could bring in or a consultant that you would recommend, or would this go through an RFP process? Or-
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of specialty work. So what NT did, they went out to for RFP. They actually had to go to like a rec source book, rec manager source book, to try to find a few firms. So I do have listings of who they went out to. I know you have some contacts over at NT with their council. You know, if they're happy with the work that was done with the previous consultant, I talked to my cohort, the engineer over at NT. She was happy with the work that they did. You know, we can negotiate with them directly, we can go with open RFP process, whatever we want to do.
That was, it's probably certain, so that was.
Yeah, they actually had 3 people that even responded.
So that cost maybe a little different, just like I said, it's 3 or 4 years old, so that makes sense, they went through that process, so it might be a little bit. Something I think we need to, just so we know what is on horizon, what we think, what our path is going forward. You know, I'm a firm believer that, you know, we're a municipality that's run by water, so I think it's really important to have something for our business. But I also know that not many places are operating municipal because of it's tough. It's expensive. Splash pads, you can get away with the role, but again, because of where we are, or whatever, I feel we need to be able to offer those lessons, things like that. Because of where we stand and, this round.
What's your daily attendance?
Probably several hundred. I mean, it's actually been a really good season, surprisingly, with everything and being able to staff it. So, several hundred a day. I can certainly look at, we looked at it this year as far as maybe cut back on certain times where just staffing. I think a lot of surrounding municipalities eliminated Sundays in the past or whatever. We have to-
Andy, excuse me, hang on one second. Can I get quiet in here, just so we can all hear? Thank you.
So we saw higher attendance on those days because the surrounding municipalities had closed on those days. Surprisingly, you think nights would be one of the most attended things, but they're really not. A lot of families kids come during the day. So it's fairly well attended. I think specific numbers.
I'm just
But
ballparking it.
is-
That's great.
It's fairly well attended every day.
Are you seeing a higher attendance from other municipalities?
A lot of them, so there's a lot of places that we're not able to open this year. So it's really hard to compare. And we only open several days a week for a couple hours. We were actually able to open fully. We got our staff trained and able to do it fully. So, and we didn't limit it to residents, but there was no overwhelming influx of people from outside or whatever, just so I didn't see it. Drastically.
Do we anticipate a higher cost than 25,000 for the study, or do we, I mean, this was 3 or 4 years
Right, I
ago.
have no idea, so I would say yes, just for that reason, but I.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll be okay because their RFP involved a lot more. They were looking at not only the pool equipment and the alternates with new construction versus repair, but they looked at the entire building itself, which is something we're not doing. So they looked at all the mechanical systems, electrical systems within the building, and then they also did look at the point that you know, it had like a lazy river through it and things like that. I mean, it was beyond the scope, I think, of where we're looking to go right now.
Alright.
And you know, during the course of this too, if we proceed with this, there are obviously details that we'll look at and you have to decide as we go further. For example, obviously the first one is what do you do with the pool, replace it or keep it, but then the pool or splash pad. If we go splash pad, then we have to look at, are we gonna just cycle water through, or do we want to recycle it, and put a UV system in? So these are all details that we'd have to get into down the line.
Just in light of the repairs to the roof on the recreation center, does it make sense to fully encompass everything and kind of do it in one fell swoop? I mean, you said it was bigger scope with the issues with the pool, and it's, you know, might be a little bit outdated as well and could be expanded a little bit.
You know, we, a few years back, probably 4 or 5 years, now that we have, I did the cinder blocks, it's a really odd building, it's really almost I've
Yeah.
never seen this blocks are like straight down. and
Right.
they're not, offset. But speaking of the gentleman who did RFP, like, I think a lot of issues we would get with that is, because of the roofs and that will get it, because there's a lot of water seeping, behind the stuff, things that we just, we did a few years ago, you're still seeing that, but the roof will page on that was the major upgrade was, I think it was 95, so about 25 years ago that was done. So they see other things that sort of updated as well.
And, I think, it's certainly, that's the direction we want to go, we want to include the building, it's certainly something we can do. But, I think, for us, that's better than I have, but it almost seems like we're in a little bit of a transition where like the after school programs are moving to the senior center. So what's the future use of this building where you decide how much you want to?
That's kind of what I'm getting
These
at.
are all
Does it-
questions that are probably.
Does it make sense to look at a recreation center to make it more inclusive, larger to encompass seniors, other activities, or work in conjunction with what's going on Main Street? If you're going through that process right now, it almost seems to make sense to, take those things into consideration. And by expanding that project, does that increase the cost involved with the study significantly?
Not significant.
Right.
I mean, we're not actually getting into like the design. It's strictly evaluating the existing systems to determine their useful life essentially.
Any other questions? All right. Thanks so much for coming in and talking to us.
Thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time.
All right, we have a couple minutes before we go out on the floor, so let's just take a few minutes break. Yeah.
Madam President, at 7 o'clock, I'm bringing everyone from the waiting room into the main meeting.
Thank you very much. Let me know when you're ready.
Madam President, at this time, everyone from the waiting room is brought into the Zoom meeting.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. It is 7:01. Let's call the meeting of the City of Tonawanda Council to order. Please call the roll.
Newman,
Here.
Cameron,
Here.
Rautenstrau,
Here.
Mylum,
Here.
Cook.
Here, please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. Let's find it. Lord of wisdom, we pray that you will bless this meeting. Help us have fun, yet productive discussions that will broaden our perspective. Help us to take the various ideas presented and think of ways to flesh them out. If we do disagree, let it be on content and not personality conflicts or power plays. Help us to resolve any disputes gracefully, be creative problem solvers, and have great team spirit. Help us to find principles that we can all agree on and put these into action. Amen. You may be seated. Communications from the mayor and city officials and correspondents have been ordered and filed. I'd like to make a motion to amend resolution 4 for next to council member David Mylum. The days and months should be 6.61. To make a motion to amend, do I have a second?
I'll second it, Madam President.
Second by Mrs. Cameron Niner. All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Newman, did you, or Mr. Clerk, did you get that?
Yes, thank you, Madam President.
All right. We're not going into executive session. At this time, we'll now take comments by the public on the resolutions. Anyone wishing to address the council on the resolutions that are joining us virtually, there is a spot for you to raise your hand. Please do so at this time. Anyone wishing to address the council on the resolutions that's here in person, please come forward. Mr. Clerk, anyone wishing to address the council on the resolutions?
Madam President, at this time, I do not show anyone in the Zoom meeting that wants to ask or make a comment about the resolutions?
Perfect. All right, hearing none, let's roll.
Resolution 1 by the council, seconded by the council. Resolved that the common council minutes from August 3rd, 2021 be accepted as filed.
Comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Newman,
Aye.
Cameron,
Aye.
Rautenstrau,
Aye.
Mylum,
Aye.
Cook.
I declare the resolution adopted.
Resolution number 2 by Councilmember Newman.
Do we have a second?
I'll take it, Madam President.
Second by Mr. Mylum. Comments or questions?
Resolved that the bills be audited, be allowed as audited.
Sorry, comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Newman,
Aye.
Cameron,
Aye.
Rautenstrau,
Aye.
Mylum,
Aye.
Cook.
I declare the resolution adopted.
Resolution number 3 by the council, seconded by the council. Whereas a special events application was received by the city clerk from Bonnie McIver Mariani for Lindsay's Legacy 5K run. And whereas the application was reviewed and commented on by all appropriate department heads to ensure the safety and well-being of our residents. And whereas all details for the above named event must be coordinated with Captain Frederick Foles of the Police Department and the event chairperson. Now therefore be resolved that permission be granted to Bonnie McIver Mariani to hold the Lindsay Legacy 5K run event on Saturday, November 13th, 2021, starting at 11 a.m. And be it further resolved that a certificate of insurance naming the city of Tonawanda as additionally insured be filed with the city clerk no later than November 1st, 2021.
Comments or questions? I have a comment. I went to high school with Lindsay McIver, and before this evening, I reached out to the family and asked if they wanted me to say anything tonight. And I did receive a message from Lindsay's stepfather that I just wanted to read to you, just for the record. Lindsay's Legacy 5K run has always been blessed to receive outstanding support from the city of Tonawanda. To the mayor's office, the common council, the police, fire, and our parks and rec department, and other components of our wonderful city government, the organizers and the volunteers of Lindsay's Legacy, thank you for our good fortune in having your cooperation for this very important cause. Our primary mission has always been to raise research dollars for the pediatric division of Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center while honoring our daughter, Lindsay Rochelle McIver, a Tonawanda High School graduate. For 2.5 years, Lindsay bravely battled alveolar rhabdosarcoma, a rare pediatric soft tissue cancer, until her passing at the young age of 21 on July 21st of 2004. Shortly after her death, we soon decided to continue with her fight. The 15th Lindsay's Legacy run started back in 2005, which resulted in over $200,000 that was donated to the pediatric cancer research. Our string of successful events was interrupted last year due to the pandemic, and we look forward to resuming this November. How it will all take place is subject to pandemic-related concerns, but we will do our best that we can while implementing the guidelines set forth by Erie County. Our fingers are crossed for a safe, fun, and memorable event. After much deliberation, we have decided that this year will be the final Lindsay's Legacy. Roswell Park has told us that any fundraising event that gets past the 10-year mark is a remarkable achievement. We share that pride with all of you. In addition to our fundraising efforts, we have also achieved some great public relations for the city of Tonawanda since 2005. We have drawn runners from outside of the Metro Buffalo Niagara region, participants from Canada, Rochester, Pennsylvania, and even from Florida have enjoyed what is arguably the most scenic 5K run in Western New York. It's pretty hard to beat the view along Niawanda Park on a beautiful autumn day. We'd like to thank all of our civic leaders, all of you, the community, and everyone whose support has made all of this possible. Any other comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Newman,
Aye.
Cameron Danner,
Aye.
Rautenstrau,
Aye.
Mylum,
Aye.
Cook,
I declare the resolution adopted.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to waive the reading of the next couple.
I have a motion to waive readings
4,
4,
5,
5,
6.
6, and 7. Motion from Mr. Mylum to waive readings 4, 5, 6, and 7. Do I have a second?
I'll second, Madam President.
Seconded by Mr. Newman. All those in favor?
Aye.
resolution 4 by the council, seconded by the council.
Comments or questions? Just comment, as I said in the earlier meeting, this resolution was amended under the days and months under Councilmember Dave Mylum. There's a typo that should read 6.61. Any other comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Newman,
Aye.
Cameron Danner,
Aye.
Rautenstrau,
Aye.
Mylum,
Aye.
Cook.
I declare the resolution adopted.
Resolution number 5 by Councilmember Rautenstrau.
Do we have a second?
I'll second, Madam President.
Second by Mr. Newman. Comments or questions? Just for those that are joining us virtually, this resolution is for a special event for a car wash hosted by the Tonawanda cheerleaders. It will be Sunday, August 29th from 10:30 to 1:30 at City Hall. Any other comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Newman,
Aye.
Cameron Danner,
Aye.
Rautenstrau,
Aye.
Mylum,
Aye.
Cook.
I declare the resolution adopted.
Resolution number 6 by Councilmember Cameron Danner.
Do we have a second?
I'll take it, Madam President.
Second by Mr. Mylum. For those joining us virtually, this resolution is for a block party for the residents of Grove Street between Broughton and Roosevelt on September 11th from 3:30 to 10. Any other comments, questions? Please call the roll.
Newman,
Aye.
Cameron Danner,
Aye.
Rautenstrau,
Aye.
Mylum,
Aye.
Cook.
I declare the resolution adopted.
Resolution 7 by the council, seconded by the council.
Comments or questions? Comment, at the recommendation of our city attorney, this resolution authorizes our city attorney to employ the firm of Vanguard and DeMarco to represent the city attorney on 2 pending Supreme Court Article 7 petitions. Any other comments or questions? Please call the roll.
Newman,
Aye.
Cameron Danner,
Aye.
Rautenstrau,
Aye.
Mylum,
Aye.
Cook.
I declare the resolution adopted. At this time, we'll now take comments. And following the resolutions, for those residents that wish to address the council in our virtual, please raise your hand. For those that are here in person, please stand up and approach the microphone. Mr. Clerk, do you have any residents wishing to address the council?
Madam President, at this time, I do not show anyone looking to make any comments at this time.
Any comments from those that are joining us that wish to address the council? All right, hearing none. Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Madam President. I did have a few things for the pre-meeting that we got to address. A resident did contact me about purchasing a section of landlocked property. He did talk to City Attorney Rua about this, so it's something that we as a council have to address, and whether or not approve a direct sale or auction or how we want to proceed. Because it's landlocked, this property, I would recommend probably a direct sale on this. He did get an assessment from Dave Morano as well, so he's done a lot of work already. So it's just a matter of formality moving forward. Secondly, this is for traffic and safety. Another resident was seriously concerned about the bike path at Cranbrook. Now, this has come up a lot in the past. It's kind of a dangerous section because you kind of come through a bend and there's trees and bushes. And if you're not paying attention, they'll go right across the road. So she witnessed an 8-year-old almost get clipped because she didn't stop. Now, I explained to her how kind of the rules are, and you know, but it doesn't take away that the drivers do have to be cautious coming around that section. I don't know what we can do about it, honestly. I mean, you can only put up so much signage. I mean, Trainbridge kind of says that loudly. But I think we need to take another look at the situation. That's all I have on that. I would like to welcome a couple of new firefighters to our city. Nicole Malone and Aaron Van Schuenhoven. Challenging one. Welcome aboard, and you are taking part in an outstanding fire department. Now, on a more serious note, I am asking for the prayers for the Afghan people, especially the women and children, because their lives are now less certain in that environment. I would also like to say thank you to all of our troops and veterans who have served in Afghanistan over the past 20 years. If any of you know veterans, I ask that you check in on them, please. A lot of our veterans are upset and confused because they ask themselves, was it worth it? Was the sacrifice of your family and fellow soldiers worth it? To any soldiers or veterans who are listening, please believe me, it was worth it. Thank you to all for all your sacrifice. I promise that it wasn't for nothing. And please take care of yourself and reach out if you need anything. May God bless our troops and God bless America. That's all I have, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. I did intend after we meet with Chief Stewart in the fire department that we'd go around the room.
It's all good.
And we can definitely talk about those issues more. Ms. Cameron.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to give a kudos out to all of the wonderful gardens that we have in our city. It was nice to see the turnout this year. It was probably one of the best that they've had. So I look forward to seeing next year's endeavor. Maybe next year I'll put mine in there, be a little brave. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cameron. Mr. Armstrong.
Couple of things. Thanks. I do have a couple of things for around the room. I'll save it for then. Our treasurer shared with me that he had an intern in Jacob Newmeister, working with him in the treasurer's office. That was a pleasure to have around. And that there's a declaration for Thursday, August 19th as Jacob Newmeister Day in the treasurer's office. He was a senior accounting major at Canisius College. And he came in to serve an internship at the accounting office. He works with St. Francis Early Childhood Center. Just want to say congratulations and great job on the work that he's done. And just to tie in off of that, often unrecognized and brought up, but just to say thanks to our clerks in City Hall for the work that they do, the amount that they help our residents. And many of them go above and beyond, to help people out. And I don't think they get thanked enough for that sometimes, and sometimes take a little more abuse than they deserve from frustrated residents. So I just want to say that we support you and thank you for the job that you do. And that's all I really have.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Mr. Mylum.
Yeah, it's actually been a busy week up in the Fourth Ward. The last couple of weeks have been quite busy, actually. I've had growing concern about the lack of mowing at Little League. 4-foot high grass that is abutting up to some of the homes that are on the east side of Fletcher. So I'm going to reach out and see if we can get at least a couple swipes of the lawnmower run up there, just to kind of give a little more buffer between the homes and the long grass that's there. Also, there was a post on Facebook, or I think it was Facebook, about the corner of Main and Wheeler from a resident, and that issue has been looked into, and we are addressing it with our code enforcement. It's already been addressed, actually, and hoping that the property owners will continue to clean up there and maintain that tree on the corner that was producing a blind spot. Next, I've been getting quite a few phone calls about the rate of speed that people are driving on Rogers, Wheeler, Hackett, Hines. And I've asked the police department for extra patrols up in that area. And I just wanted to thank the police department for being so reactive to that. They have been sending up extra patrols. I know Rogers Avenue is a big one, especially with the new pavement. It kind of looks like a speedway. And some folks are really taking advantage of that. So I'd like to thank the police department for sending extra patrols up there, and hopefully we can curb this speeding that's going on, and there's a lot of kids on that street. So just thank them for that. And, you know, it was, last but not least, I'd just like to mention, after talking or having the auditors come in tonight, I kind of like to throw a kudo to the people sitting up here. We did some pretty proactive budgeting as soon as we kind of saw what was hitting the fan last year. And I believe because of that, we kind of came out of this on the other side in a positive manner. And I think the numbers show that. We spent a lot of time, I believe it was pretty much every week between what, April and June, maybe? I don't know. Coming in to work on an amended budget to not have to pass these costs along to the residents. And I think next year, that savings realization is going to be seen by the residents. And I just kind of like to congratulate everybody sitting up here for taking part of that and being so proactive in making sure that we were looking out for the residents and doing what we needed to do, even though we didn't know what the resolution was going to be. So with that, I will end my long-winded speech and say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryland. Mayor?
Thank you, Madam President. I'd also like to welcome our 2 new firefighters to the city. We're glad to have them on board, and we look forward to a long and successful career with the city. Garden walk was really nice. We, in our corner of the city, we usually don't get too many people up there because we're one of the only ones participating. We had over 80 people between the 2 days, which isn't Sharon and Mike Moore territory with the over 200 they had, but if you saw their gardens, I would gladly leave my garden to go see theirs. But I think it's a great event. It gets bigger every year, and I want to thank our visual and performing arts and all of our residents that opened up their properties to our residents to see their green thumbs. Seeing as though this is the last meeting before the start of school, believe it or not, I want to wish all of our educators and the students much success on a somewhat uncertain 2021-2022 school year. I know us parents are rejoicing. I have 2 more left to get through school, and my wife and I will be scot-free, so we can't wait for that day. But you know, hats off to the students. Hopefully we'll be in school for the full 5 days this year, and they can get the instruction they need and deserve. Treasurer Malecki's been a third-party independent auditor for the city for many years, and I think they do a fabulous job. Before with Joe Hogenkamp and now with Bill Reese, you know, the city welcomes them with open arms and gets them the information they need to do an independent audit. And just to piggyback on what Councilman Milam said, you know, I took some heat back in March for some of the decisions that I made, closing things down, shuttering recreation programs, things of that nature. And then the council followed up with the appropriate budget cuts to those lines based on the decisions that I made. And I think all of us should be proud of what we have done throughout this pandemic, because there really is, and I've said it before, there's no playbook on how to run a city through a pandemic. Because if there was, it would be 100 years old. And I think it speaks volumes to the people that the residents elected to be their voice in city government. And I'm very thankful that I get to sit up here with the individuals that I am sitting up here with, that we try to do the best we can to make the best decisions possible for the city moving forward. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to congratulate Joey's Place. I know he's sunk in about $1 million into that building. He closed his location on Hurdle and opened up a place here in the city. While he's owned the building for a number of years, he has focused his attention on that building. And I know that the updates that he has made to that building has caused him a lot of grief with some contractors, but the change is noticeable, and I wish him the best of luck moving forward and opening up a new restaurant here in our city. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things. I'd like to wish a happy belated birthday to our city assessor. Yesterday, Dave Morano celebrated a special birthday. So we hope you had a great day, Dave. Porch Fest is happening this weekend, and I want to thank the organizers for coming together and putting this together for another year. I believe there'll be maps at City Hall for the homes that will be having artists. So please stop on by on Sunday from 1 to 6. It's always a great event. The Common Council, along with the school board and the TEA, are sponsoring a back to school drive on Wednesday, August 25th from 5 to 8 at the high school. Warriors Wear will also be open from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'd like to thank those who have donated to this event so far, and stop on down August 25th from 5 to 8 with some school supplies. All the donations we receive go to students in our community. Tomorrow is going to be our last Warriors Walk of the season. I know Skip Johnson here is shedding a tear. It's our 6th season, Skip, right? 6th. We did sign him to a long-term contract, so he's nodding in agreement. But I want to thank Skip for leading us on our history walks. Each and every walk, there's something new that I learned, and we continue to grow and grow. I remember the first walk, we had about 15 people, and we're averaging about 50 to 60 now. And it's interesting to get to know the people that join us on our walks. We've had some people as far as Florida come to our walks, who previously lived in the city of Tonawanda, and came on our history walks in Pennsylvania and different counties. So it's very interesting, and I just want to thank Skip. I know there's a lot of hard work and preparation that goes into these walks, and we certainly appreciate you doing that. I'm sure we'll be back next year for our 7th walk, but that's still to come. I'd like to welcome our new firefighters. I wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay well, and we have the best first responders. So thanks for joining our team here. I'd also like to welcome Joey's Place into the city of Tonawanda. I have a lot of fond memories of the building. My dad worked for many, many years at Bedell, so I wish Joey's much success there. On another note, some sad news to share. Tom Stryker recently passed away. Tom Stryker served as our 3rd Ward councilman from 1975 to 1976. And then he served as the council president from 1979 to 1982. his service to our community continued as he was a member of our Civil Service Commission for many years from 1984 through 2008. I just ask that you keep his beloved wife and his entire family in your thoughts and prayers. And I'll be making a motion tonight to adjourn in his memory. With that said, I know the council will be meeting with our fire chief, Chief Stewart, and some personnel from the fire department. So for those that are joining us, please, stick around. And Chief, if you're ready, I know we're a little behind schedule, but if you want, you can come on up and bring your team up. All right, Chief, thanks for coming.
Anyways, let's talk about several things. Let me start with the two firefighters that we recently hired. What I'll do is, we'll be on the guys. Explain, we're gonna bring probably both on the lot experience. So we're excited that we're able to make that. What I'd like to first talk about tonight is the pending contract between the city of Tonawanda and Twin City Ambulance. When we last spoke, there was lots of questions from the council. Guys, we're not ready at that time to sign off on this contract. So what I did is I brought some personnel today, Assistant Chief Jim Barber, Captain Josh Lavin, Firefighter Paramedic Jay Knight. These three actually sat on the committee and spent many hours drafting the RFP, and then meeting with Twin City, discussing writing, helping write the proposed contract.
So before you go any further, council, correct me if I'm wrong, we did adopt a resolution for our city treasurer to, we tabled it. Okay, I stand corrected. Carry on.
So I thought that we could take this opportunity, if there's any outstanding questions and information, in particular to the proposed contract, we should be able to answer everything that may be puzzling.
Madam President, can we get Chief Stewart one of the microphones from the table up front there?
Yes.
Which one's gonna reach?
So do you want him up here, or are you not able to hear him?
Yeah, he's not coming in the Zoom.
One of these ones.
So I just hold this up, I guess.
Is it?
I could probably just set it there.
Okay, well, let's test it. He walked away.
Yeah, let me do a test. This is the fire chief speaking. How do you hear me, Jim?
Oh, that's great. Much 1000% better. Thanks, Chief.
All right,
Wonder if that
on my
microphone's
back
on or
later
not.
from being hunched over, but that's okay. I'll take one for the team.
Or is it easier if the chief comes up here?
You don't have to hunch over. Yeah, whichever.
Yeah, do you want to sit up?
I
here,
want to
Chief?
be with, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Jim's gonna rub my back later. He just cover it.
Okay. All right, so I stand corrected.
I
yes,
think,
so-
I think the question was, it was all financial stuff. Okay, what is this, at the end of the day, at the end of the year, what, okay, to reiterate, the contract is going to set some provisions in how we're going to work operationally. And it's also going to include provisions to recoup some costs that we would be spending on equipment. And I believe the main question had to do with, okay, what are the costs and what is the revenue at the end of the day, at the end of the year? I think that's mainly what the concerns were.
So you said there's the provisions in the agreement on how we work operationally. So what is different now than what would, if we were to move forward with the
The-
contract? What's
Probably the
the-
most significant change is that our firefighter paramedics would not hand the patient over to a Twin City paramedic, but they would accompany that patient all the way to the hospital that they're being transported to. And they would continue to carry out the primary treatment for any advanced life support measures that need to be taken.
Is it happening now? Are they coming?
It only happens in certain circumstances. So the protocols we work with, for instance, if we have to give a narcotic medication, by law, our medic has to write in and do that. That's happening, I think I have some stats. Right now, Kevin Lapham did some research. About 46 times a year, we're averaging that we're going to give a narcotic and have to write in with the patient. There are a few other instances, if it's patients in a critical state where they need 2 providers, 3 providers, then we would also write in.
So about how many times a year, would you say now, ballpark, is there one of your personnel?
About 56 times. I believe that was the count for last year.
And that's unreimbursed, is that correct? From us?
Right.
And the idea behind this is to get reimbursement for that.
Yeah, well, stay with the patient for all ALS calls. Now, those numbers, if we do all ALS, the last 4 years, the average is somewhere around 500 times a year we would be riding with the patient to the hospital. That's about an average number if we look back through the last 4 years. Right.
Yeah, because that 56 was just for narcotics and critical care, correct? And then this, the 500 would be for all ALS.
That would be all ALS calls.
I guess one of the questions when you're talking about our residents is there lack of care services being given to our residents we have right now? This improve quality of care of the public.
I wouldn't say that there would be a big significant difference. I think there's an advantage to the caregiver who arrives first on scene, does initial assessment, and then carries through versus handing it off to a paramedic who, arrived maybe 10 minutes later. When that occurs, there could be a slight lag, and sometimes there may be some missed signals, information. It also requires, another full assessment by another paramedic often. So it could possibly slow things up, but it's nothing significantly bad. This would be from that standpoint, I would say it'd be a slight improvement for patient care, given that we, keep, You have something to say? Sure, come on up.
All right, in aspects to that,
This is Josh Lapham, Captain with the Fire Department.
we take pride in our city. So we go above and beyond any chance that we get. Providing that care from start to finish, all the way to the hospital. It makes sure that somebody within the city is taking care of the residents. It's not some person outside the city or a big corporation that's looking after them. We're taking pride in our own work. It also expands our paramedics' knowledge, because I would say about half of our paramedics have been transported before, so it gives them a piece that they're currently missing. Helps them develop, makes them a better paramedic, providing better care to our citizens.
Can I just want to, because what, in that aspect, okay, I just want to ask approximately how much, I know you can't say, but approximately, if you were to go in the back of an ambulance, how long do you expect to stay at the hospital with that patient?
I just want to make sure your comments are captured, so everyone.
Typically, I mean, it's gonna depend. It's gonna be what facility you're going to, how serious the patient is. If it's a critical patient, you're getting bed within 5 to 10 minutes. Stroke, STEMIs. If you go to one of the stroke or STEMI centers, Buffalo General, South Buffalo Mercy, typically it's a 12 lead or a neuro assessment and right upstairs, or into a pod, basically one of the cardiac pods, STEMI pods, or stroke pod. So you could be there for 15 minutes. There are times where you might have a 30-minute delay or more at the hospital, but it's really dependent. There's no more diversions at hospitals where they can't go. They have to always accept patients, so they're gonna kind of try to turn over. And there's a lot of ERs within the area. You have DeGraff, Kenmore, ECMC, BGH, go on and on. And those facilities have expanded their capability to treat people in the ERs. Every time I've transported, I think I've been back within an hour, hour and a half, typically. And a lot of what I do is I get critical patients, they have to go to city hospital. So it's kind of what I do.
How do you get back?
The ambulance, yeah. The ambulance. So they stay with you. They stay with you. Similar, like, think of the town of Tonawanda paramedics. That ambulance takes you, they go to the hospital, whether it's Kenmore, DeGraff, Suburban, Mercy, BGH, ECMC. They'll stay with you and then they bring you back. So they transport you back. So
I didn't know. if
Yeah,
they
so-
sent Somebody else. Okay.
yeah. So like a cardiac arrest, if I were to go patient to Kenmore, the duty officer will come pick me up. So once I get a bed, I just decon my equipment, which I would have to do regardless. And then I'm back in the city within typically 20 minutes.
So in piggybacking on your comment about taking care of the residents, increasing the care. Do you see a hole in service if somebody's held up the ER where one guy is now essentially out of service? If there were to be another call that came in, or is that backfilled with somebody? Or is that-
We won't backfill unless it drops below 4. The way we backfill is we'll do a manpower call back over the radio. We'll ask for available personnel, volunteers, and for support or typically 3 or 4 guys, but that's our route. So that's contact, not time I have.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because, that's obviously a concern, if you get a double call, or if you get a working fire, or a car accident or something.
We bounce those numbers too as best we can. We know that if we go into this, there'll be a few more times that we may need to do a manpower callback. It's kind of hard to predict exactly. In the past year, it's been less than 10, 20, less than 10 times. One of the things that Captain Lappin used as a guide is he looked at how many times we have more than 2 calls at one time, 2 ambulance calls, triples and quads. When we get 3 calls, almost, but not always, we'll have to do a call back. If we get 4 calls at one time, we'll always have to do that. But it's maybe 4 or 5 times. So we look, and we looked at that, and we used high numbers. That's what the higher, and we put 40 recalls. So the average hourly rate multiplied times how many hours will accumulate. And we also added on costs for equipment that we're not going to get reimbursed to Twin City. And we still had a fairly substantial revenue. Still can't tell you publicly, maybe that's something we can do.
That's what I didn't want to get into any numbers with the contract.
I think that we're still concerned, how much doing this is going to cost part of it.
Is this a similar program to what Lockport attempted a few years ago?
No, Lockport actually runs their own ambulance.
It's actually more close to the.
Town of Tonawanda, yeah.
Okay.
This is exactly what the town of Tonawanda has been doing for years.
And I just didn't want to get into that Lockport situation where that just crippled them.
Yeah, well, they
They had other issues going on.
had financial issues, and like usual, and it's normal, the fire department, usually of the 3 departments, that's the one that takes a hit. So they lost a lot of personnel, they get rid of their ambulances, and their transporting revenue went out the window, and And there were lawsuits and,
Lockport's actually in line to start their ambulance again. Are they? And they're getting closer. I think they got 6 guys in paramedic school again this year. So you can't be not profitable if they're going back forward again.
Would there be any benefits of speaking with Twin City and allowing them to house a maybe here?
Jim. That was just part of the discussion.
This was part of our discussion and the proposal we had originally put out. In discussing with both the major carriers in the area, AMR and Twin City, that model really doesn't work for either of the providers. Currently, the way they handle calls, they randomly station units throughout their coverage areas. So they're basically not assigned to a building per se. Now, if that was something the city really wanted, Twin City was willing to do that, but there was a substantial cost to it to dedicate an ambulance to the city. With our call volume and without doing 100% of the transports, it doesn't make sense for us at this time. Generally, we either have Twin City rig posted at Colvin and Eggert or at their Fillmore quarters. We are, due to their increased coverage in Amherst and Clarence and out that way, we are getting significantly more units from the Boulevard and the 290, their Commerce building, and as far as the Boulevard in North Tonawanda. So we are starting to see longer response times, which really doesn't affect our operations. The only thing they have that we don't is the means to transport them to the hospital. This program will fill that gap for us and give us a piece that we're missing for our paramedics now. The city has always been very proactive in EMS. We were one of the first ones to go ALS years ago. Starting in 2000, the city invested a lot of money to get paramedics to our city residents. Over the 20 years in my career, we're significantly over $2 million between schooling, equipment, recertifications, and upgrades that we've invested to provide that for our tax-paying citizens. This is the next step. What hasn't been covered is a lot of the questions. We really can't give firm numbers, and we were aware of that going in. There's an out built into this contract for both sides. If this doesn't work for Twin City, or if we're having trouble and not seeing what we anticipate, it's basically a 3 months notice and we go back to our operations today. I'm sure you guys have all seen the ads on TV looking for EMTs and paramedics. We have 12 of them on staff right now today. That
I don't know why I don't know this. Are they required, are you guys required to be paramedics?
we're required to be a basic EMT,
Basic, but not.
not paramedic. We have taken the stance that that's the level of care we wanted to provide. We got the city to buy into that in 2000 and we've maintained it. We've been as high as 16 people that were certified as medics. But over the years with retirements, trying to get guys back into school, so we're in that 12 to 14 range now.
How many per shift then?
Each shift safely has 2. There's some shifts that have, 4 on it. That's something that with the chief and the mayor, we can address to increase, kind of even that out.
Can it be done just through scheduling?
Well, there's seniority rights and union issues and stuff like that that go into it, so it would require the chief, the union, and the mayor to sit down to try to work
But to
work
make
that
this
out.
work, you'd have to have a medic.
Every shift has that. Every shift has basically 2 paramedics.
And that would be the one, or one of those guys would be the ones. that
Yes.
do the transport.
Yes.
If it did, we would certainly meet with the union to create a, I got another MOA to allow for that. And the union's been very, very supportive. I don't think they, going back to the 80s, as we progressed in the EMS, they've never stood in the way of doing what's right when it came to patient care, staff, that kind of stuff. EMS.
Now, Chief, you talked about the committee. when was the committee formed? You know, and who sits on this committee?
2 years ago. 3 years. ago?
3 years ago?
Yeah, about 3 years in the making. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So during the 3 years, you've been meeting regularly? And who sits on the committee?
The three gentlemen right there.
Okay, and then, and chief, then you?
So, yeah.
Okay. And the mayor's office, is he on the committee? You work in the mayor's office?
We've had him, his assistant, sit in on some of the meetings we've had with Twin City. Yeah.
And then our council liaison?
Yeah, and as well, Tom as well. Tom.
And then our city treasurer, has he been involved in the discussions from a financial standpoint?
You know, slightly, not, since the questions evolved from the council, he's been involved.
Okay. So, and it's the recommendation of the committee to move forward
Yes.
with this agreement,
think-
correct?
I know there's some concerns, but like Chief Barber described, we can, this isn't working, we can get out of it pretty much immediately. There's no binding date, really,
And both sides are able to that.
Yeah.
I have one hang up this, but that helps this. That 90 day out. My one hang up is that having that person out of service for X amount of time. But Begs the question.
As currently staffed. Tag on that is how much of a personal change and shift do you foresee with doing this process. We are well equipped to be able to just easily slide into doing something like this. Or would you have to shift people around, shift schedules around? Some sort of an excessive amount to make this work.
no, there would be no reason to shift anything around. You could put this in place tomorrow and there's very little, if none, adjustments.
I mean, just a concern with that, in the context, people, if we do bring people on, be able to accommodate this, it doesn't work out. We got a little.
Right. Well, and that's a situation in the town of Tonawanda as well, and how they have addressed it is they just, if they get inundated with EMS, they just call for additional ambulances. They hand primary responsibility over to Twin City. And we would do the same. I mean, picture a technical rescue or a fire situation where our paramedics have to fight the fire, maybe do rescue. The Twin City would come in and be the primary medics, probably for if we were to pull victims out and they needed immediate help. And I believe that's part of the contract. Also in the contract is they would also station an ambulance here during our peak times if we're all tied up. So we have at least, paramedic level care in the city for, Mrs. Jones, who on the other side of the city has a heart attack while the fire's going on or whatever incident it may be where most of our personnel are tied up.
Just the other day.
You guys are busy, yeah.
Three in a row, so have to rescue.
We did our smoky fire at the custom millwork building on Franklin. Yeah.
You guys have been busy.
I think, speaking for me, a lot of my concerns have been addressed.
Chief, I just have a couple questions. In a sense, we're doing this right now, right? I mean. in a sense, we're doing this.
Yeah, right. We're not as many times as we would be.
We'll need to do it on a bigger scale.
And when you say recoup some of the costs, so if I'm a critical patient, you transport me along with Twin City. How, is there a third party billing company that comes in?
No, we're actually using Twin City as the billing. There's no third party for this.
Okay,
I believe Twin City is using it. Are they using a third party right now? So technically there is, but not for us.
so clinical is not my forte, okay? I just work in a hospital. So, I call 911, you guys respond, Twin City comes out. One of you fine men or women ride with me to the hospital. Can you explain the process for recouping the funds? Would I receive a bill from Twin City for services A and then,
No.
I mean, would there be another bill or how would this be delineated?
Yeah, no, it would be just the one bill. To my knowledge, they're not creating anything extra onto that. It's gonna be the same bill. We're just getting a percentage of what what has been described in the contract. Go ahead.
So then Twin City would then reimburse.
Right, our reimbursement would come through Twin City Ambulance. What
Okay.
currently happens now is when any one of our guys provides an ALS treatment, and we write in, and if we don't, the ambulance company is not allowed to bill for that service because they didn't provide it. So that money is basically left on the table. By us writing in, Twin City is now allowed to bill for that service because they're reimbursing us for it. The patient won't see any more than their deductible. So there's no additional cost to any individual who uses this service. It's basically money that we're entitled to get that we can't because we don't have that operational agreement right now. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, makes perfect sense. I just didn't want there to be,
No.
you know,
we don't
another
need
bill
that.
of
We don't
service.
need that.
No, yeah. And then, so who would be auditing these bills to ensure its accuracy, that we're getting reimbursed?
That would be Twin Cities' responsibility.
And we have.
Would we have
created-
someone,
Yes, we have created one member in our department who will be a liaison with the city and review all of those calls every month to make sure that we're receiving the proper reimbursements. So we have created that step to make sure that they're getting all of the paperwork they need to bill and that we're receiving all the revenue that we're.
I'd like to bring up our city treasurer, and it's kind of in the back, but do you mind coming forward? Don't look around there. But I mean, you're a key player in this as well.
Reviewing really wouldn't be my job to get involved. It truly is a numbers with Twin City when the contractual agreements are met where they have the need to have one of our gentlemen right along and the certain payer code is correct. Certain payers, I believe Medicare, it's been a while since I read the contract. There wouldn't be reimbursement. There actually has to be some level of reimbursement that Twin City would have a level of revenue that they could share. Then they would work that back in. So they'd provide reporting to us of what they provided to us. So it really would be more incumbent on the fire department and the software they keep for the calls that they do, knowing what they provided and what the call was. I'm not even sure a lot of the cases I would be that involved in these. I wouldn't be able to know why it's
Right, understood.
was transported. I'm sure if the fire department has that liaison that would have the ability to review medical records and know that that call was correct. One of the things that's stipulated in the contract is if it gets to the Blue Cross or the United or whatever, and they argue the level of care that was provided, if it was ALS and they come back and they want to argue basic life support, that's where the fire department liaison would step in to help bolster Twin Cities case to the health insurance payers to make sure that they understand why the level of care was provided, because if it dropped back to a basic level of service, then again, there would be no reimbursement because there's just no room in that type of reimbursement model. So this really would be incumbent upon what they're doing now to track their calls and knowing what calls they feel would be there. So they would tell me we should be getting X number of dollars for X number of calls. And then, of course, that would be back on my office to make sure that we receive that as a receivable and tracked it and made sure that the fire department's revenue line was covered. And then we'd be tracking overtime that was specific to those calls. I'm sure the fire department will be doing that also to make sure that they're not causing themselves to go into a deficit on their own budget lines. And then we'd be able to relay that to the council and make sure that the future budgets take care of that and make sure that everyone's receiving the benefits they felt they would get when the contract was negotiated. So would that be a major part if it started to roll forward? I mean, just in making sure that we actually receive the revenue the fire department feels, and we'd be able to track that for the council and let you know where we're at with that. But again, when it comes to medical billing, that's one is detailed. Two, there's that goes on for a couple of years at times. It really can be out there where we think we have something, they have to make an accrual for it, knowing that a certain number of calls will get audited 3 years later by Blue Cross's auditors, and there'll be adjustments in clawbacks, so it'd be tricky. I mean, it'd be interesting, and I would love to, go with the firefighters about the Twin Cities, kind of go over and make sure I truly understood what was detailed in their RFP and the contract language for the level of call and the type of reimbursement and the payer for each patient. And then we could look at our age base and realize who's Medicare and stuff, and maybe hone those numbers. But I have spoken a lot to Assistant Chief Barber and other firefighters, just in what their feelings and where we think any additional costs would actually truly lie against what we might actually see from Twin Cities, and additional study might be needed, but so far, I think I have a pretty comfortable understanding of what they're relaying here, so.
Do we need any software upgrades or?
No, again, this is all coming from billing. It's kind of like the federal money. We might think we're getting it, and then it's really, down the road, but again, any dollar is better than no dollar. And if our service to our taxpayers, as long as we're weighing what the service is worth to what the cost to the taxpayer. I mean, I keep back to the old thing. I'd love to have a fire truck in every corner, but it's not necessarily feasible. So, and this is the same idea applies.
And then what budget line would this?
I would think the revenue would be a set budget line against, we probably put a target revenue. Honestly, the first year, I don't think we'd target any revenue. We would probably have to discuss how it fits into your current overtime budget calculations for backfill, if there has to be any adjustments there. But I think the budget talk would be pretty consistent with how it's been now. Again, the firefighters' true feeling is this won't result in any overtime that wouldn't be covered by the revenue. So we'd have to really feel it out for the first year and watch it and document. But it's not going to be in January, we're going to go on our first call and see money in January. It's going to be January, go on our first call and see the cash in September.
Right.
So, and we'll have the expenses in January and possible. So it's going to be a definite something we'll have to truly watch and talk with Twin City as we go, and make sure that if they think there's a problem with the call and there's no revenue, we want to know that sooner than later, so we can adjust our methods, and the fire hall can do theirs. And I guess it would be my job to question the fire department to make sure I'm relaying that to you correctly. And I'm sure your liaison would also ask the same questions. So. Does that make sense?
Final thoughts?
Well, I do want to thank you guys for the work you've done on this. I have had the pleasure of sitting in a few meetings with them. I truly believe this is long overdue. And I have the most confidence in our department that they wouldn't have put this forth if they didn't believe that it was a good situation.
Any questions? All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Chief.
My second subject.
Oh, you have another?
I got a third.
Oh.
Another thing that's, in my eyes, is overdue is the body armor protection for our guys.
Yeah.
That was part of this year's capital budget. I have a drafted RFP that we would put out there for interested vendors. It's in the city attorney's office right now. He's taking a look at it. Once he okays it, I would like to forward that to you guys for your to overlook it in your opinions and so forth. To review, there was a 26,000 and change allotted in the budget for that. I would like to purchase 30 altogether. So we can cover each of our career staff and have about 5 left, 4 or 5 left in case we have volunteer responders. And again, to kind of review what we would use these for, this would be for, God forbid, an active shooter situation. If something like that to occur, we would form at fire headquarters as soon as possible, and we would respond to the scene, and under the direction of the police, we would make our way to where any victims may be lying. Just like the police learned from Columbine, if you stand back and don't act right away, people are gonna die. It's the same thing with injured people. We need to get to them as soon as possible and stop the bleeding and get them to a medical facility. But I do not want to send my guys into that type of scenario without some kind of protection. I had firefighter paramedic Jay Malley assist me on this. Jay is a combat veteran, Gulf War, Iraq. He's been shot at, he's also shot. And so I consider him pretty much an expert in ballistic protection. And with him, we were able to draft up, I think there's some really, really good specifications that we put in the form of an RFP, because doing it that way, we should get maybe some better competition on the people who want to sell us this type of equipment.
I have a question. Go ahead, Dan. No, it's okay. I just want to know, with the armor, each one has to be fitted for this, correct? I mean, it's not,
Not like the police car. So this would be standalone plates,
okay?
in a cummerbund style plate carrier. So it's not like the soft armor with hard inserts.
Mhm.
And you grade over, I believe it's 5 years.
5 years.
typically. These, a lot of what we're looking at is 3+ protection, which is your up to your green tip,
Okay.
your 855 ball, 556 steel penetrator, multi-round capability. It is extremely simple. It's a cummerbund style carrier, quarter of nylon. You're going to drop a plate in the front and the back. That's your ballistic protection. It's very similar to what we wore overseas, except we have soft armor and ESAP ceramic. When I was over, those are brittle, drop them. The steel plates, the benefit to them is that most of the companies that make them have a 12-year warranty on them. And I believe many of them can be recertified via X-ray company. You take it back, recertify them, say 5 or 10 more years on it. So it's not something every 5 years you gotta look to replace it, like a soft armor style.
So my husband works for a company that supplies all of the vest, actually the armor for all of our military throughout. So some of their plates are rejected. I mean, is that something that you guys have looked into, or because the military is so picky that there
It would
cannot
an
be no
NIJ
imperfection?
certification.
Okay.
So it would have to be an NIJ. There's no NIJ level 3+, there's an NIJ level 3,
Mhm.
but all the steel armor manufacturers have a plus, which indicates it meets the minimum standard for rifle, which is NIJ level 3. But they have that protection for penetrator round places. You don't need to go beyond that. There's not a need for level 4.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
You're not, this isn't something DP.
No, unlike the police have to wear something,
Have the equipment.
the police have to wear it every day because of the nature. This would be something we would put on for that worst case scenario.
In the event. that it's-
Or if we're going on something that sounds like there's a threat out there, they can put it on.
My question is kind of piggybacked up with what Ms. Cameron said. So you would essentially be outfitting everybody in the department, but they wouldn't necessarily say, this is your vest, this is your vest, this is your, right? It would be maybe measured for each person, but maybe not have it signed to them.
Oh, yeah, we would. I believe that's what we want to do, Jay. Sign the best, correct? You can get kind of a one size fits all, but in Jay's opinion, we'd be better off.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of
Fit.
different size folks too.
What's that?
You've got a lot of different.
Yes,
size
yeah,
folks.
yeah.
Plan is, it's like small, medium, large, extra large kind of thing, and then the plates are all gonna be standard. 10,
Hey, yeah, so I'm just gonna get ready to send you guys across the street from 125 Adam for the same.
You'll have that cummerbund, which will give you
Second
some
one.
movement, some adjustability within the size, but it should hit just about everybody in different varying size without being a custom fit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just, you know, that, honestly, I thought we already.
I was just gonna say, I mean,
I thought this already went through.
I have in my notes here, the body armor was 26,635, and we agreed to it.
So I'll get you the RFP next up, and then we'll go from there. All right, good.
And I also have we would pursue any grant opportunities, that we were on board with this.
Yeah.
While you're
Bond,
here-
we never made it to the bond resolutions. I think it's what the treasurer talked about bonding, but it was not in the bond resolution.
I mean, Jim, if you could pull the council and make sure we're on board with 26,635, and if you just want to dot your i's, cross your t's, make sure this amount is accurate for us to move forward with a bond resolution, and we'll work with Bill on that, right?
Chief, you said you wanted 28, 27,
Hoping for 30.
30.
Bill,
Right?
Madam President,
No, I think he's talking about,
Mr. Clerk?
Madam President, is the treasurer there? I thought we bonded part of the capital for the.
No,
he's shaking his head.
he's shaking his head, no.
No,
We bonded the roof, right?
Generally PPE. And it was our understanding that money that was in the budget this year was actually for firefighter PPE that was expiring. The conversation I remember having in the mayor's office was for having so many new hires and so many people getting their new equipment that we need X number of dollars in bunker gear. That's kind of what we had, and we aren't allowed to buy bunker gear. So the way it was explained to that, whether we'd actually be allowed to buy a ballistic jacket would be another question. I know we didn't ask that question, but I will be speaking with the bond council about the possible refinancing to get the mortgage. So I will ask what their experience with body armor and that type. But that would also be something that would be a definite ask for grant things, and that would also be something that we definitely fit the definition of what we were on to spend the AF. If it's 26,000 out of the 750,000, that might be something we need to discuss right away. So there's ways to do it, but I will get an answer on whether we're allowed to buy body armor, which would be different than the bunker gear, which we were not allowed to buy. That we have to put into the budget. So that was something we're going to put into this year's budget on a line.
Okay, so just so we have this on record, Mr. Clerk, if you just pull the council that we're in support of purchasing this body armor for the fire department. In one way, shape or form, we'll figure out the rest.
okay, as Madam President indicated, this is with regards to the body armor. And see if everyone's in support of moving forward with that. Newman,
Aye.
Cameron Danner,
Aye.
Rautenstrau,
Aye.
Mylum,
Aye.
Cook.
Aye. Quit while you're ahead. I just had a quick question. How are the defibrillators working? The new defibrillators?
Very, very, very nice, good equipment.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Unless we have to get the better.
Right. Right.
Significant.
Perfect.
This is just a heads up I want to give you guys. I'll be brief. We utilize 4 support vehicles in addition to the fire apparatus. Car 10, it's assigned to our fire prevention officer, code enforcement officer. Car 11, which is assigned to our training officer. Car 13, which is assigned to our fire police and emergency management person. And then there's car 12, which is my vehicle. The way it normally works is our Title 106 command car. We get a new one, we run it 5 to 6 years, and we hand it down to the training officer.
Mhm.
We run that for 5 to 6 years, and then hand it down to the fire police and the emergency management director.
Mhm.
Car 10, the fire prevention car, we normally make a purchase and just run it till it's dead. And same thing with the fire chief's car. Our current car 11, the fire training officer's car, we've been informed is not gonna last 5 more years. We're lucky to get 2 years out of it. So we're gonna be a little bit of a quandary. What are we gonna do for, what are we gonna do for our fire police? What are we gonna do for our emergency management? They share that car. And they're busy. All those planned events, we use that vehicle, all the meetings, all the other stuff that goes on, emergency management, these are the volunteers.
National Grid's been notified.
Our fire prevention
They're gonna contact
car
with an ETA.
is a 2010, but it's in pretty good, it's 11 years old, but it's in pretty good shape. It would be nice if we could hand that down now to our fire police and our emergency management. But where's the money gonna come from? Well, I got a little loophole thing that occurred. My car, which is a 2016, was acquired on a municipal lease, a 5-year lease. At the end of 5 years, we own it. That occurred a year ago. We never received notification from Ford Credit like we did with the other vehicles. You think about it. So we put that payment in this year's budget. So it's sitting there. What is your thought in allowing us to use that payment on another municipal lease? What I would do would be get a comparable vehicle for our fire prevention officer and then hand his car down. I'm gonna put this all in writing. So you can look at dates, mileage, years, costs and so forth. But I just wanted to throw that at you. This just kind of came up and didn't even know we had that money in the budget for another payment. If we go into another 5-year municipal lease, it's going to be close to what we have in the budget. But that's, that would be, you guys would have to allow for that to occur if we have that. But any questions?
You're saying this is a bridge in your budget?
Yeah,
There's enough in there to cover.
it'll be close. It'll be close.
What kind of vehicle is it?
What
category?
I would look at getting is another, similar to what the police have, a Ford Interceptor or a Dodge Durango, something, whatever best price we can get. And again, give that to the fire prevention officer and give his car to where it's needed. We'll nurse car 11, the training officer, for 2 years. And that's what we're gonna be due to, we'll now own our current Title 106. We'll hand that down and then we'll hopefully go into another municipal agreement.
So we're looking at a vehicle.
Yeah. And we've been doing with the exception of the pickup truck, we've been doing the mini lease because it's got the least impact on the annual budget. You don't have to make it a capital expense. Interest rates have been pretty good. And it's been working out pretty well for us. Like I said, with the exception of this car 11, we've been holding on to these vehicles for 15 to 20 years.
So you'll put it in writing.
Hmm?
You'll put it in writing. and send it
Yeah,
to
I'll write up kind of what I said so you guys can take a look and hopefully let me know what I do.
All right,
Good.
sounds good.
All right, thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, let's go around the room. Wow,
I got nothing.
you don't have anything? You don't have anything?
Don's gonna pass on my information, probably the traffic safety, I would imagine.
Yeah, I will.
So,
And I'll probably converse with Mike and how we proceed with the next steps on that one.
okay. When does traffic and safety meet next?
On the 30th.
Okay.
Just a couple of things. I don't know where it's in the current situation with the government, but as part of these reform.
Hey, Sean,
Sean, he can't hear you.
Oh,
can we get the speaker off of the,
can you hear me now? Sounds like really. Okay.
no, we gotta get the speaker off of the,
Oh,
there you go.
Thank you. That is a little better, I guess.
Thanks, Chief.
thank you, chief.
Just in regards to the police reform, I don't know if there's any change to it, but one of the things we were supposed to follow up on was the police committee ambassadors. It's something we should pursue regardless of whether it was, I mean, we put this forward with good faith.
Correct.
Just a reminder that we need to follow up with that.
Want to do that since you were on the committee?
Sure. And just kind of see how we're going to move forward with that. Another thing was the zoning with the LDC. Has there been any determination with that, I guess, Don, is more the question?
There has not. The LDC has not met this month at all. So hopefully next month, but again, we had another resignation. Actually, 2 of them, so I don't know where we stand at this point.
Gotcha. But that was that under Jason?
Jason was one of the resignations.
Was one of the resignations. Okay. Because he was kind of the
Correct.
lead on that. Okay. But we did commit, or they committed to financing that at one point, correct?
They did. With all of the changes, but we haven't received anything.
Okay. It was really it. Just touching on a recent call from a resident in regards to a tree being cut down, and had some questions as to, its replacement. New residents here, so they didn't know the process, but I did bring up the question if we were budgeting any kind of replanting of trees for this year. The mayor's office did mention that it is budgeted in the next year. I think I wanted more with Rick in here and that to be a part of that conversation, but as I know it's a little early, but as we talk about budgeting, to consider, especially if we're in a little bit of a financial situation, to have some more opportunity here, is refunding some of the Parks and Rec. I know we've been behind. It's something.
And that would have been
We never have enough people, but it's even with the summer help, we've had such a lack of summer help. If it makes sense to have somebody all year round to do the summer help, as well as pick up on the things that might be missed or neglected over the winter times, checking on buildings and properties that are here. And if there's a way to put someone in as a general laborer that's able to be shared between the different departments. I did speak to Joe Orthling at one point in the past week that it would be a welcome idea. It's somebody that he could share with Parks and Rec and be able to get some things done. But even to bring 1 or 2 people on and offset by lessening the number of summer help, because you won't necessarily need it if you have somebody full time. But I'm just kind of putting that out there for all of us to consider it and as we move forward. Yeah, that's all I had.
Mr. Brown, anything?
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were
I'm sorry.
still looking on your phone.
Nope.
I had nothing.
Okay. I had a couple things.
Jim, I do one thing when you're done, so.
No, go ahead.
I did get a call from a resident too. I think he reached out, or she reached out to you about a zombie home on Virginia. Potentially.
No, I hadn't heard anything on that.
Okay. Well, apparently there's a zombie home and it's not, like, there's people coming in and out of this thing. It's not a good situation. So
That's been
I know it's your ward, but I didn't know if you had an update on that.
No, I know that was problematic a while ago. I had asked about it. It was supposed to be in the process of being rehabilitated or going through the whole process of being picked back up by the bank, but
So they're aware of the situation at least, very least.
At that time, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
I had a similar complaint, not for one in Virginia, but one up in my ward. And the response that I got was that it's kind of all still on hold because of this COVID stuff and the courts and all that other stuff. The hope is as soon as the courts open back up, that the zombie home commission will get to be either, refurbishing these homes or selling them or doing what they need to. But all that stuff was unfortunately put on hold as well due to the pandemic.
Okay.
Thank you.
I had reached out to, just for everybody's information, I'd reached out to NIPA to find out where we are at with the LED streetlight project. I know I reported at one of our previous meetings that we were waiting on the nodes and they were expected to come in July. They did not arrive. We're now looking at an arrival date of September. So I did invite NIPA to come to an upcoming council meeting. So Jim, I'm working out the details, but just everybody pencil in the second meeting in September, to meet with NIPA and our engineering firm. We actually have to work out some kinks here, because we now are responsible for the outages. We have to talk about what our process is going to be before we implement the LED streetlights. I know that NIPA had been working with the mayor's office, so I just wanted to bring everybody together, the council and our team, just to talk about how we respond to these outages, and how we're going to handle them.
Need to bring in DPW. electric.
Once we have a date, I'm just waiting to make sure Joe Sesbo and Joe Crimmy are available. But I wanted to give everybody enough time, and then, yes, I'm gonna reach out to Joe Worthling and make sure they're available as well.
As it stands right now, is IMO, or are they still
No.
responsible for
No.
repairs? So.
No,
kind
it's
of
us.
limbo right
Right.
now. So we are it.
Yes. So, and I'll, I had asked for an update, and I had asked them to provide us an update until we, start in the production phase here, but they wrote, as it remains, the remaining materials that we're waiting on have gotten pushed back into September. We've been in contact with the mayor's office regarding the reported outages around the city, and we are currently waiting on direction from the city on how to handle these, as out of sequence work is an additional charge from DNM. Once this has been decided, we might look at having a discussion about beginning construction despite not having all the materials on hand. We've been waiting on a firm delivery date for the remaining materials so that we may avoid a remobilization fee or having to circle back a second time on fixtures that incur an additional cost. But we'll need to discuss a plan with the city, as we're quickly coming up on the dreaded winter season as weather that accompanies it. So what I asked is, I said, I'd like to bring, the council together. I want to bring our partners together so that we're all on the same page, and how we address these issues. I've had, some residents reach out and say, hey, my light's out, and, such and such. So before it gets worse, I want us to be proactive. So, but pencil in the second meeting of September at 6:15. But again, Joe is just going to make sure that, his team's available, and then we'll make sure that we have everybody available as well.
So when you refer to power outage, you're referring to the head failure or the current
Correct,
high pressure sodium heads that are on the poles?
correct. Until we, and I don't know what inventory we have. Or, so I just figured let's bring all of our players together and let's have the discussion. Because, we're going to be the ones that get the call that, hey, my street light's out.
Yeah.
So,
Just to say that somebody doesn't, God forbid, hit that pole and knock it down.
so right now we're responsible.
Probably better hook up your fence.
It's still.
Right. Right. So, it's unfortunate, they were supposed to be here in July. And, we wanted to begin to install in September, but now we're pushed back a little bit. So, kind of more to come on that, but I wanted, everybody to be aware of kind of what's going on that front.
So I'm assuming the mayor's office was aware of this
Well,
situation? or
it says
just
we've been
hearing about it now?
in contact with the mayor's office regarding the reported outages around the city and are currently waiting on a direction from the city on how to handle these, as out of sequence work is an additional charge from DNM. So I replied back with, let's schedule some time to bring everybody together to talk about, next steps and work out a plan on how we address this. So we've tentatively scheduled some time for the second meeting in September, which gives everybody enough time to get an update on where our project is and kind of put some proposals on how we can, make sure that we respond to these outages and what our plan is. So, so more to come, but I just wanted you to be aware that that's kind of on our front burner right now. I know, just to kind of piggyback on the Drescher and Malecki report, and I hope we, can spend some time talking about the fund balance policy, because I think that is something that we should implement. So, but let's take this back and maybe we can talk about it at our next meeting about implementing that, that policy.
Or formative policy.
I'm sorry?
Form.
Form, right. Well, I mean, it's pretty nicely written, so, but, yeah. And the other thing is, I wanted to see what the council's thought was on having a meeting on an off night, if Bill was available, in the mayor's office to talk about now, how much have we been, how much?
750.
So to talk about how we best utilize the 750,000 that we've received in federal monies and make sure that's, within the guidelines.
3 years to cover 5
Right.
years.
So I figured this was a very important topic and it's probably best served on an off night. Where we talk about how we best implement these funds. So,
Just on that.
if you just,
sit through several training sessions. The best practices are, so you don't get concerned that you'll be cut out of the process. The reason why the money isn't deferred revenue now is when we spend the money, we have to document what it was spent on, and it didn't change the fund balance. And then we also have to show the Department of Budget and the Office of the State Controller that we amended our budget for each spend. So when the council decides that that is an appropriate expenditure of the funds, you will actually, I'll help prepare it, but we'll be changing the revenue, revenue from federal sources and the expenditure line. So that was one of the pieces that, so once we have a plan, the council will have to actually, but they don't want us to write it into the budget. So it's not something that's going to be in the budget process. They don't want us to budget the money. They want us to, as we need to spend it, adjust our budget. So in whatever budget year we're in. So that was a unique and kind of a bit of a surprise to me. And they also made it clear, the average feeling around town is the next tab probably will never show up. So, it's there, it's great, but it's not something that everyone's thinking that might become how they pay for the infrastructure repairs for streets and roads. And
so Bill, could you, or maybe you already have this, could you give the council an assessment of what it would cost us to make us whole with the fines and the revenue and the loss permit?
To be honest, they don't actually calculate it that way, so I have looked at what our losses were. What they do is they take 19 audited revenue, they add a 4% inflation factor, which is large. And then 4% of our budget is actually more than 750,000. So we've been working with Drescher Malecki to calculate, and that's the first thing I have to report to the feds in October.
Okay.
Is how much that is. But right now, my best guess is for the first year, pretty much the entire 750 would be considered lost revenue and not the other side. So we would have an additional capacity to use it where it wouldn't be sewer or, it wouldn't be in the restricted side. It's going to be in a little bit more of the open side. But the open side is defined as something that would be part of normal government function.
Oh, okay.
So, which encompasses body art or, normal government function.
So
So
what you're
there's a
saying,
good portion of that 750 would be open to where we don't, although we do have sewer pumps that are breaking, we do have, obviously, we know what happened last month and we have to address it. There is a need that we can't. But that's part of the sewer fund. So this money can be split into the sewer fund, but as it was explained, once we put it there, it can't come back.
okay,
So if we know it needs to be spent there, we can move it. But once we move it, we can't get it back.
so basically what you're saying is we don't need an off meeting.
I would rather address that when we get the budget time, with
Okay.
sewer rates and things.
Okay.
But if there truly is a need over there, the council
Yes,
can move.
correct. Okay,
And
It's
that
gonna
would
take
be
that back.
Wholly incumbent on your decision.
right, okay.
Interesting.
Anything else? All right, I think you guys are good. All right, thank you. So with that said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn in memory of Thomas Stryker, who served as our councilman from the third ward from 1975 through 1976, as well as serving as our council president from 1979 to 1982. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Madam President.
Second by Ms. Cameron. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Have a great night, everybody.
Check with the one that's on the floor. Yeah, that's not right. Yeah, there's a little.
Oh,
blank there
yeah.
that's dedicated.
Yeah, I
Must
think it
have
might
read that
be.
like 100 times. It was
Oh,
sitting
really?
on the record.
I didn't know
I
that.
was pretty sure. it was, right?
He's related to David Strasberg.
Oh, really?
I think they're a cousin.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Didn't know if you knew that off the top of your head.
No,